Hey everybody, Craig here, and wow, this video is so overdue. So this is actually the third time I'm trying to record this. So the first time it all went amazingly well. Iscsi multipathing. I was prepared to say it worked fantastically. I'd been running it for ages, and it was great. And genuinely, it was. Genuinely, it worked, and it was absolutely fantastic. And then I realized that I had an issue with my environment. I was trying to bring in a couple of hosts that were still stuck in maintenance. Well, they weren't stuck in maintenance mode. I'd left them in maintenance mode. And I wanted to bring them in to add a little bit of extra capacity. So there was another 3 hosts. And what I found was the Iscsi multipathing, for whatever reason, just wasn't happy. One of the in the Iscsi configuration itself, one of the interfaces had been stuck as being bound to the network name rather than the actual interface, and there was a bit of a conflict there, and it just wasn't very happy. So I ended up recording this other video where after I'd finally fixed it and kind of corrected things, I'd gone through and was like, oh yeah, look, here's how you do it, here's how you do that, here's oh no, it didn't work. So what I've done is I've gone through and I've corrected a couple of things in my environment, because I'm pretty sure that what I was seeing was actually environmental, and it was more down to me switching my networking from, so my storage networks, they're all on these two networks here. Each of these represents a separate physical switch. What I'd done is I'd converted these just before that video. So rather than running on just an untagged network, one interface representing one physical switch, I VLAN tagged each of these to try and isolate my storage traffic a bit better. In a production environment, you want to be VLANing this stuff anyway, because you want to be able to guarantee that the only thing on here is your storage. You don't want to be mixing, and if you've got clever networking kit, you can often apply QoS and prioritization to it, so there's some benefits there for that. But I think that the way that I went about cutting these over probably wasn't the cleverest, and that probably gave me the issues. So here I am, third attempt, and we're gonna see what we can do to we're going to go ahead here and apply Iscsi multipathing. So my environment itself is still running. There's still a few VMs here. I've turned off quite a few of the environment of the VMs that I had, but otherwise you can see there's quite a few bits and pieces running. We've got 17 VMs, so it's not a huge environment, but there's enough there to be a kind of a show of kind of look, it still works. So in Iscsi multipathing versus normal network link aggregation. So you might be saying right now, well, why wouldn't you just bond the network interfaces if you've got two NICs and just use that? And that'd be that's an amazingly valid suggestion when you're dealing with normal network traffic, when you're dealing with wanting higher throughput from virtual machines that are going to one or more going to multiple sources. That's brilliant. But the way that link aggregation usually or typically works is that rather than breaking a particular stream or connection up and splitting it and spreading it across the interfaces, what you'll find is one connection will go down one of your links. So a particular file transfer will only ever get as fast as a 10 gig link, if that's the speed of your interface as it is here. You'll never see a 20 gig transfer unless you're using multiple threads, multiple connections. That's when you start seeing the benefits. Iscsi in particular gets affected by this because Iscsi links are, it connects and it stays connected, and it throws data up, reads and writes down that particular link, and great, it works. But what it means is that you're never going to be able to take advantage of having the multiple connections. You can for resilience, so in terms of, oh, oops, I unplugged my other switch, is my storage going to still working, still carry on working? Yes, it is, because you've got the resilience there. You just don't have the improved throughput. So The reason why we look at using Iscsi multipathing is Iscsi multipathing is aware that there's multiple paths. So instead of having to hide and kind of bond things and pretend that it's one path, but really it's two connections, Iscsi multipathing actually knows that, hey, there's two connections, and hey, they're going to connect to two different places. And so because it's aware of that, it's able to intelligently chuck packets down different through the different paths, and it knows how to deal with that, so that you can actually take advantage of having higher throughput, you can take advantage of having the higher resilience, and all of that good stuff. Anyway, lecture aside, so let's get on with it. So there's a couple of prerequisites here that we have. So we need to make sure that our FreeNAS box is configured correctly, which is effectively what this is trying to say. So if we go over to our FreeNAS box and look in the network configuration section here, and if we look at the interfaces, we've got two physical interfaces, and each one of these, so these two VLANs here, attached to one per physical interface. We can see that I've enabled the TOE stuff, which is hardware offloading for a bunch of TCP functions. I don't know all of the details of it, but effectively it means that your CPU's doing a bit less, and especially with things like Iscsi, the Iscsi kind of wrapping that kind of goes on behind the scenes, that gets handed off to these cards, which is the main reason why I chose these cards, actually, to try and reduce some of the overhead on the system. So you'll notice as well, I've also got the MTU set to 9000. You don't necessarily have to do this. I found that generally the throughput was a bit better with that, but if you don't want the headaches of it, don't worry about it. Just run it as is. You're better off having multipathing than you are a higher MTU. There's some knock-on impact to this, especially when it comes to oVirt. You don't see it with VMware ESX, but you do with oVirt. If I go over to one of our networks here, if I go to one of my computes, so Persephone, I choose you. So if you go over here, you see our two physical interfaces, so ENS1F4 and ENS1F4D1. These two things. So all of the networks that are attached to these also need to be 9K MTU. That starts changing if you can start doing clever things like SRIOV, which is what these MGMT interfaces represent. These represent physical functions with SRIOV, which I haven't gotten working yet. But in that context, you can have whatever MTU, and that doesn't matter. But in this context, where you're sharing VLANs on the same interface, on the same physically presented adapter, they need to be the same MTU. I mean, you can see here there's a bunch of OSP VLANs and storage. And if we go to our networks here, these are the OSP VLANs. So you can see these are all 9K MTU. And then if we go have a look at storage is also 9K MTU. So that's an important consideration, because if you don't want to be in a position where you're forcing things to be running at 9K MTU, then you're going to have to take that into account. So in the other things that we've done over in FreeNAS world here is we make sure that, where are we sharing Iscsi? We're going to make sure that we've got both of our authorized networks set up here. We're going to make sure that we're listening on our two different interfaces, so the 251.2 and 250 networks .2, so that's already listening for us. And you'll notice as well here that I'm only listening for Iscsi on our two storage networks. I think that's really important, that you're not polluting or not making accessible your storage to non-storage networks. You don't want somebody to come in off the internet, get into your web server, and then suddenly be able to access Iscsi directly. That poses some other data integrity issues, but yeah, just kind of bear that in mind when you're designing whatever you're going to implement here. For a lab, it doesn't matter too much, but for something a bit more production, you'd want to kind of consider that. We've also set up authentication, so there's username, password that the hypervisors are setting up, are using when they connect. We've got our targets associated with the authentication and with the portal group. So our oVirt data stores here These are our target is being presented on the interfaces we want, and it's presenting the things that we want it to as well, and the appropriate extents. So that's all good and great. So from this side of things, it's all set up. We've got our two network interfaces. Each one of these is connected to a separate physical switch. So we do have genuine diverse pathing between the hypervisors. Second, we need to go into our hosts. So in oVirt, if you go into one of your hosts and go to network interfaces, we want to validate that we've got our storage networks attached to different network interfaces. And you want to do this because if you've got them both on the same network interface, then you're not going to see any benefit at all, either in terms of resilience or in terms of throughput. So just make sure that you have these configured correctly as well. We'll just double check as well that we've got the VLANs set up properly. So I know that this system is working and it's currently running storage traffic across both of these networks. So I'm not going to check that. I know it's working purely from behavior, which means that we can now move on to actually setting up the Iscsi multipathing. I'm just going to have a quick sip of coffee. Right, so data centers. So this is where we're going to be configuring the multipathing. So if we go into, not edit the data center, we want to go into the data center itself. Ours is called the Verse, and we've got 3 Iscsi targets here. We've got our hosted storage, which is for the hosted engine. We've got a gold tier data store, which is our pool of SSDs, and we've got the silver tier here, which is our pool of spinny 10K Rusts. So we're going to be expecting all 3 of these to cut over to the Iscsi multipathing configuration when we apply it. So if we go over to Iscsi multipathing here, you can see there's no multipathing configured at the moment. If you go into add, and then we're going to call this something sensible, so we'll call it UK Iscsi Path 1, something like that, just something descriptive that makes sense to you. We're then going to go through our logical networks, and we're going to find storage 150 and 151, and we're going to select those. So this is saying to our Iscsi multipathing, use these 2 networks. So these are the 2 networks that you're going to effectively bond, but at the Iscsi multipath D type level. We're then going to go and tell it which storage targets we want to pass over this with this multipath configuration. So we've got 2 storage targets configured here. We've got oVirt data stores and oVirt data stores, and you'll be saying, well, they're the same. Yes, they are. So they're the same except the address that they're being presented on. So we want to select both of these because these represent your 2 different diverse paths. If you've got multiple interfaces or anything like that, you're going to see more targets here. If you don't see your 2 targets, then you've probably done something wrong, and you're probably going to need to just have take a look at what your storage server's presenting out. If you're using, so in VMware, for example, you've got a mechanism to statically configure your Iscsi storage configuration for your LUNs. If you're statically configuring it as opposed to relying on dynamic discovery of these paths, then you'll probably need to plumb those in yourself. So again, just bear that in mind. So all we're going to do here is we've ticked these things, we've given it a name, we're going to hit OK. And what's going to happen is this is going to orb for a bit. And what's going on in the background is it's connecting to each of the servers, and it's making sure that Iscsi and the multipath D engine is configured and is doing its thing, as in it's aware of the 2 different paths and it's going to use them. So what I'm going to do is, just in my other tab here, I'm going to go over to Persephone, and we can have a little look at the logs. Now this process takes a little while. It's not just a 5-second click the button way, hey, off you go. You're going to start seeing some you're going to see a little bit of interruption to your workload. If I go to IPA1, just as a, so you can see that our workload here is, you know, our IPA server at least is still going. This isn't the best test because IPA isn't exactly write heavy, it's more about reads. So there's less likelihood that this is actually going to see any kind of problem. If I go ahead and log in there to our platform, there we go. We can see that this is all nice and working, and we've got the things here that we expect it to be. So if we go to host, we can see the hosts that are currently enrolled in the platform. Iscsi bond itself is still being applied. Let's go and have a little look, see at the logs, and I'll just flick that to be info and above. So we can see here there's some stuff going on with the pathing anyway. Let's have a little looky at storage. So Cockpit's actually quite a nice tool to be able to diagnose and kind of see what's going on with some of these things. Certainly you can see the throughput going, so we can see this storage throughput going to these things, so that's good. So that's not too bad, but it's not fully applied the configuration change yet, so we should end up seeing something like extra path discovered, path is up. We're going to see something like that. So taking a quick look back at the oVirt hosted engine itself, the hosted engine is now saying that this is applied, so it's happy with this. And if we go back over to Persephone and take a little look, see at the logs and see what's going on, are we seeing anything? Yes, okay, so this is, in fact, this is a really good log. So you might see some of this type of thing in your system logs, and actually this doesn't matter. So we expect that so what's going on in the background is Iscsi is aware that it can connect to 250.2 and 251.2, and it's going to try and connect to both of these through both of the interfaces. But the fact is that because these two networks are not routable, and them not being routable is really, really important unless you want to see some really bad performance, this IP address is never accessible over this VLAN. So that's perfect. That's exactly what we expect to see. So if we go back to, so I don't really mind about that, because that's just telling us that the oVirt engine was having a little bit of issue getting connected. We can see that there's no workload here that's paused or having any kind of storage issues. I'll just do a little bit of a, so that's all looking okay. And then if I go back to, so in the background here, I've been running some just DD writes to the storage just to see kind of what's going on in the background. The storage performance isn't the best, but to be honest, I didn't expect it to be. Whoops. There's quite a bit of load anyway, just with some of the things going on this system. But if we go to, let's figure out which machine this is. Okay, so this Bastion host is on the Haven hypervisor. So let's take a look at Haven. And if we take a look at our storage networks here, what I'm looking for is a little bit of traffic across both of the interfaces. So if I run the DD again, and again I'm just writing, so it's going to be this transmit rate. I'm also expecting this to be around about 700 or 800 megabytes a second. Yeah, that's not massively fast, but I think that's more to do with the with the load of the actual system. Actually, the other thing that I'm going to check is I've just recabled the stuff in the rack itself. So what I'm just going to triple check is that I've not done something really stupid with my switch configuration and actually managed to plug these things into the wrong interfaces, because it wouldn't surprise me if I'd managed to. So there is a physical connection between between my two switches so that I can connect, and the VLANs and all the rest of it are passed between the two 10 gig switches. So probably worst case scenario is that I've put the things into the wrong ports and it's having to use the other, like go over the transit to get to the other switch in order to deliver it to where it needs to go, which would mean that we're limited to 10 gig anyway. So let me just double check my configuration there. Okay, so this is just before I do that check. We've just had the activation thing pop up. This I've seen this each time I've done this, and it's just where the hosts are getting used to the new storage paths. And it's going to try and, because the storage gets pulled out from under stuff, it's going to try and migrate stuff away, and all of that kind of stuff. So we'll just let it do its thing. It's actually a good indicator for me as well about whether my switches are configured correctly and all that kind of stuff. But as you can see, you know, the connection is working. It wouldn't be able to migrate this if it wasn't able to talk to the storage. So at least one of the paths are there. And certainly what we're seeing in terms of usability, we wouldn't be able to do this test if we weren't able to write to the storage. So as far as the existing workload, apart from moving things around, and you might actually want to put the cluster into maintenance mode to do this, just to stop it doing this whole migration piece. But yeah, you can see it. Things are still working. Nothing's dropped yet. I mean, if you were going to do this in a production environment, I definitely, or anything that you care about the data of, I would certainly be a lot more cautious and probably shut down almost all my workload, just to be on the safe side, because depending on how your storage is configured, if you don't have synchronous writes enabled, you're going to lose data and you're going to end up with corrupt data sets and all the rest of it. Okay, so this feels like it's gotten a bit slower. Let's take a look at my switch statistics in the background here. So what I don't want to see is anything going across my transit. Okay, so I've just inspected my switch configuration, and that's fine. There isn't traffic going across the uplink between the two switches, which means that it's configured correctly in terms of I've plugged the right cables into the right hosts and everything is in the same switch for a particular VLAN. So that's good. So if we just take a little look-see here at what's going on with our hosts. So it looks like it's having trouble activating these hosts. Yeah, we can see there's warnings on some of these. If we go into, just click the filter there, and if we go into Persephone, what's going on with Persephone? Let's have a look at events. So it was auto recovered, it failed to connect to the storage pool. Okay. So what I might do here actually is just stick this host into maintenance mode, just so nothing transfers to it. And then I'm going to reboot it, I think, and see what's... because if we take a look at... Yeah, so this is struggling to connect to the Iscsi, to that storage. So one thing I did see is if we just quickly drop into terminal and then go Iscsi ADM -m session, it should show us all the sessions. So one thing that I did notice last time I went through and did this is that there are multiple sessions established. Now, some of these sessions are going to be using multipathing and some of them aren't. So let's just have a little, I think it's, no, not snodes, just nodes. Thought it was nodes. No, just node. Okay, so we can see that there's 3 sessions there to 250 and 2 to 251 for some reason. Let's, what was it? Was it -D? No, there's a way to get more detail. Oh, P1. There we go. So we can see the paths now that are being taken here. So what we don't want to see is this. So we know that 250 isn't accessible over the default interface, and we know that it's also not accessible over this VLAN here, over 151. So this one is working fine. This one should work fine, but this one's going to have a little bit of trouble. I think what we're going to do here is just reboot this host. So this will take about 20 minutes or something, and just take a look at what's going on with that. So we'll come back once this has been rebooted. Okay, so this host is back. So let's have a little looky at what we've got to work with here. So looking back here, okay, so this is still showing as in maintenance, so that's good. So let's activate it. Hopefully the agents and stuff are started. Looks like it's starting to do things. Let's have a look at this. Okay, so this looks a little bit more sensible. We're seeing the right paths on the right places. This is rebooting for some reason. I'm not sure why this is rebooting. I didn't ask it to. I bloody fenced it. Okay, yeah, so we need this cluster to be in in maintenance mode. Okay, whoops. Alright, so if we go to the data center and if we go in here, can't put it to maintenance mode. Oh no, that would just be the storage anyway. Let's go in here. Do we really have to just do it from... Maybe we can do it from the cluster screen. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is just jump onto one of my other hosts to stop this reboot fencing thing from happening, because that's going to cause us some problems. So if I go, all right, so if we want to put the cluster into global maintenance mode, dead easy to do it. Go to one of your hosts, go to virtualization, hosted engine, and then put it into global maintenance. And that should stop the fencing going on. We can see the hosted engine is up and it's running and everything's happy. It's just for some reason that things aren't, it doesn't think that it's up and happy. But with this, so I think we probably just need to reboot the hosts. So we'll wait for this to come back up and then have a little look and see if we can do a rolling reboot of all of the hosts. Alright, so our host is back. Let's jump on there. Let's have a little looky. So I'm hoping... Okay, well I was hoping not to see storage issues. Let's have a little looky over here. What is going on with our host? So if we look at events... So oVirt hasn't cottoned on yet that it's back, but it does think it's just non-responsive. So let's see if this host comes back into an upstate. These two hosts are still kind of, they're not happy. They're really not happy. And to be honest, this is the same kind of behavior I was seeing the last two times that I tried this. Weirdly, the first time I did this, it just worked, and doing a DD actually showed an improvement in speed. DD is by no means a good test of your storage performance or anything like that. It doesn't do so many things. But actually, just for kind of a real high level, I want to shove as much traffic down a particular storage path as I can. It was doing the trick. So I know there's probably a few of you thinking, no, he's using DD to performance test this. I'm not. I promise you I'm not. There's far better ways. FIO, for example. So, okay. This is probably just waiting for the agent to come back up. So the agent eventually brings itself back into a state where everything's happy. Let's have a little looky at the paths. So the paths look okay. Let's take a look at sessions. No active sessions. So that'll eventually come back around. Let's have a little look at over HA agent and just see. Okay, so the HA agent is failing for some reason. Yeah, so these inode messages we're seeing for our syslogd. I'm not enjoying that. It looks like, so that looks like the imjournals.state file is corrupt. I wonder if it's just powered the host off. Like literally just cut the power to it. LS block. Yeah, so we don't have any of the Iscsi devices being mounted here. Let's just do a quick restart on Iscsi D. See if that does anything. I don't think it will. Okay, let's have a little look at the oVirt HA agent logs. Oh, okay. So this is complaining because the... okay, so this looks like it's complaining because of the SRIOV. Okay, this is SRIOV rubbish. Okay, this is easy enough. So I was messing around with SRIOV on this host, basically trying to get my virtual functions to come up straight after boot, but I wasn't able to do it. And so if you cast your mind back to the MGMT interfaces that we saw, that's what they were about. And obviously, so it's not persisting that configuration over a reboot. So I wonder if it's literally just... Let's get that the right way around. Okay, so we can see that the interface actually exists now. MP of 1011, 12, and 13. So the interfaces are there. So why is the VDSMD still having a little bit of a moan about this? There's nothing, just dependency failed. Okay, I wonder what dependency that is. Let's have a little... it's probably the oVirt hosted agent, if I was guessing. HA agent. Right, so we've got the agent, which will go down here. It's complaining that that isn't running, and then it's responsible for starting it. So if we check the broker as well, because that's another service that runs here, and sometimes... So this is also wanting to connect to the VDSM. This is going to be a fun one to debug. Okay, so this isn't looking particularly good. I've set the Persephone off on another reboot, but I've got another issue there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to back out this change. So if I go into clusters and go into Serenity and... No, not into clusters, into data centers, sorry. If I go into the verse, Iscsi multipath, and then I'm just going to remove it, and that'll force the engine to remove this configuration from the other hosts. And what I noticed last time is that just worked. So I'm expecting these two hosts to still say that they're not particularly healthy or anything like that until the VDSM has had a chance to talk to the engine and get the new configuration. And actually straight away, there it is, works. So that is particularly frustrating. I'm not sure what's causing that, what the issues are. The only difference I've got between this not working and this working was the networks being VLANs. It's possible that it could be something to do with the MTU, though I've done quite a lot of testing to make sure that the MTU is configured correctly. So I'm not massively sure where to take this next. So far as I can see in this version of oVirt, multipathing isn't working. So yeah, not really sure what else to do about this now. So Persephone is rebooting. That's clearly got an issue anyway. That host with the rsyslogd state file not being accessible, and there were some IO errors there that I'm investigating. Hopefully I'll be able to clean those up or do a fresh install. It's probably about time for a fresh install of this hypervisor anyway. So yeah, we'll have to come back to this another time. But there's an upgrade due. So maybe we'll do the upgrade and then we'll come back to investigate multipathing. But for now, yeah, everything's still up, and it's quite interesting actually to note that our Bastion host is still up, still working, and there hasn't really been any adverse effect here to the workload, aside from it looking quite unhappy in the dashboards and things being migrated between other host VMs being migrated between hosts. Otherwise, it looks okay. And I think the performance here, this is just my 4K block size. So limitation, actually one of the awesome things coming in over 4, which I'm quite excited about, is, 4.4, is the actually 4K Iscsi mounts, because at the moment it writes at 512 bytes. So every byte, every block that you're writing is 512 bytes. Slightly different to the network packet size, but it should, with bigger block sizes, it should help improve performance a little bit. I mean, if I was to change this to 1 megabyte, I'm sure, and then this is what, 8 gigs. So if we do 8,000 of those, we should see that this, I'd expect this to be about 700 megabytes a second. I know that the 4K writes are slower than 1 megabyte writes, so I'm not too concerned about that. I haven't seen any, nothing seems to have degraded anyway, let's put it that way. Yeah, so this is a bit closer to what I maybe would have expected. So especially given the stuff going on in the background and things are moving around and migrating and what have you. Other than that, in fact, there's nothing migrating at the moment. Maybe I would expect it to be a bit quicker. It's probably something to do with, actually, the FreeNAS box was rebooted recently. But yeah, anyway, we've been able to back out that change. So to summarize here, we've tried to apply Iscsi multipathing. It didn't work. I think maybe it's related to the VLAN configuration, because as I say, it was working fine before off VLAN with these 3 hosts. So it's probably something related to that. So yeah, we'll come back to it maybe after the oVirt 4 upgrade. All right. Well, thanks very much, everybody. If this was useful, or even if you know what I'm doing wrong, because I'm probably doing something stupid, let me know in the comments. It'd be massively appreciated. If you like the video, do your whole like, subscribe thing. That would be awesome. If you don't, tell me, because how else can I improve if I don't know? So yeah, thanks very much, everyone. Thanks for watching. Hopefully it's been good, and see you soon. Bye-bye.